Hello, and welcome to this week's Arab Digest podcast. I'm William Law, editor of the Digest. Our daily newsletter has no sponsors, and we carry our podcast without any advertising. We are an independent voice, supported only by our subscribers, and with your help, we're going to keep it that way. Check us out at arabdigest.org. When you go to the website, you'll find details on how to receive our reader-supported daily newsletter for 2 months for free. My guest today is Jon Hoffman, a research fellow in defense and foreign policy at the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. And Jon's particular focus is on U.S. policy in the Middle East. Jon, good to have you back at the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bill.
The Cato Institute is known as a libertarian think tank, so I'm just wondering how its libertarian principles extend to how you view the Gaza conflict and, more broadly, Washington's overall Middle East policy under President Trump.
Sure. So, a little background on Cato and libertarianism. So, we believe in individual liberties, limited government, free markets, and peace. How does this apply to U.S. foreign policy? We advocate for a more principled and restrained U.S. foreign policy to protect what we consider core U.S. interests, which would be the safety, prosperity, and freedom of the American people. And we believe the United States is relatively secure, and we believe that the United States should engage the world diplomatically and economically. We're not isolationists, but we should avoid trying to dominate the world militarily. And in the Middle East, we have a very limited idea of what U.S. interests are. It's really just three: the free flow of oil, protecting the American homeland from terrorist attacks, and preventing the emergence of a regional hegemon, any one actor to dominate the whole region. And all of these, I would say, are very easy to accomplish, and they're often undermined by our own presence in the region, our policies in the region, and our partners in the region. And speaking about Gaza in the past 2 years after October 7th, the past 2 years have highlighted the failures of U.S. Middle East policy in really just an unprecedented way. Allowing Israel to steer U.S. Middle East policy has led the United States to subsidizing mass atrocities while facilitating Israel's maximalist ambitions in the occupied Palestinian territories and the broader Middle East. And this has left U.S. interests in the dust. And, I've said this for a long time. I think most folks would agree. You cannot reform U.S. Middle East policy without reforming the U.S.-Israel special relationship. This relationship is a strategic liability. I would argue Israel is the greatest strategic liability the United States currently shoulders abroad. And this pathology of the special relationship that has dominated for decades, it's hindered Washington's ability to even think clearly about the Middle East. And it's undermining civil liberties here at home, too, the stifling of free speech and so on. So my argument is very clear. It's walk away.
Walk away.
Yes, walk away, end the special relationship, and approach Israel the way the United States approaches or should approach any other country on planet Earth, which is from arm's length and a perspective of American interest.
Well, I want to get back to that and how it could play or should play in America. But let me ask you about this. You just very recently returned from a fact-finding mission that took you to Israel and the occupied West Bank. What was the purpose for that trip, Jon?
It was a research trip. And, I and some of my colleagues, we went to Israel. We went down to the border with Gaza, and we went all around the West Bank, and we were interviewing folks all along the way on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. And really the purpose of it was we went, I think, about a week after the ceasefire was sealed. And of course, there's still bombing going on, but we wanted to get a gauge on how different folks saw the current ceasefire, the prospects for escalation in the breakdown of the ceasefire in Gaza, or escalation in Lebanon or with Iran. And then in particular, how the Israeli side and the Palestinian side perceive shifting winds in the United States, particularly among the political right, which is literally the only thing everybody wanted to discuss. This probably took up the vast majority of every conversation I had, particularly on the Israeli side, because they're in a state of panic. They genuinely don't know what to make of the shift on the political right in the United States.
Are we talking here, John, about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Tucker Carlson? Some of these people have come up very, very strongly against supplying Israel with the weapons to commit the genocide. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, we're talking about just this overall shift on the debate on the political right. The right, for a long time, had criticized U.S. Middle East policy. There's endless wars and stuff like that. But it's finally beginning to question something that it had traditionally not, which is Israel. And like I was just saying, you cannot reform U.S. Middle East policy without reforming the U.S. Israel relationship. And this shift that we're seeing on the right, yes, like you just said, influencers such as Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, all these people talk about Israel all the time now. And then in Congress, Tom Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, folks like that speaking out. But even among the base, the people itself, there's a large rift emerging. It's largely generational. It's the younger folks are more so turning on the special relationship, and people come to it from so many different perspectives. You can come to it from the free speech perspective, you can come to it from the America First foreign policy perspective, the prioritization perspective, and of course some come to it from a darker place.
Yeah, but,
Yeah. Oh, go on.
no, I was just going to ask you that you said that the Israelis you talked to are, I think the word you used was panicking because they're
Yes.
seeing this rift developing.
Yes, absolutely. And this is the debate that they're having over there and that we're also having here in the United States is this a real paradigm shift, or is this going to pass? There were certain folks in Israel that we spoke with that saw this as passing, kind of this idea of a post Netanyahu government being able to win back the right in the United States. I don't believe that is the case. I believe this is a real paradigm shift. The U.S.-Israel relationship on the left and the right is becoming a litmus test for so many different things. And my biggest concern, and something that was kind of hinted at when I was over there, was the more Israel sees the writing on the wall among younger Democrats and Republicans, they're going to push for more concrete and lasting security commitments from the United States. We saw the news the other week about the possibility of a 20-year memorandum of understanding. Netanyahu denied this. Of course, take everything Netanyahu says with a grain of salt. There's also, rumors of Israel pushing for a more formal security guarantee, kind of akin to like what NATO countries have, as a possibility as part of, expanding the Abraham Accords. So I think we're in this critical moment here, and that was really impressed upon me when I was over there, whereby Israel is trying to lock the United States into something more permanent, lasting, and concrete.
Yeah, and yet, as you say, there's strong aversion to that developing in America itself. And part of that has to do with what the IDF is doing in Gaza, the genocide there, and also the ethnic cleansing going on in the West Bank. The IDF stands by and watch these terrorist settler thugs driving Palestinians out of their homes and off their land. You talked to some IDF soldiers. I'm just curious, John, what your impression was, what they had to say to you, what your sense of really the morale of the IDF is at this stage, this critical stage for, for Israel, for Palestine, and for the rest of us, really.
Yeah, I would say it really differed on who you spoke with. I would say one particular interview that I had, I was interviewing some folks who had served in Gaza over the past 2 years, and they described their experience to me very plainly. One of them just said, "All the worst rumors you've heard are true," and then some of them, went a little more in depth, explaining, what was really happening on the ground, which is, the vast majority of the IDF, and we already knew this, but the vast majority of the IDF was not actively fighting Hamas. They were holding the no-go zones, the kill zones. And among some that we interviewed, there was, I think, genuine remorse. There was this idea that, what we've done is horrible. Some of them obviously come to it more from a perspective of concern. Those who are critical, concern over Israel's future. This idea that this is unsustainable in the occupied territories. We're destroying our image internationally. So they're concerned about the direction in which Israel is headed. So people come to it from different perspectives over there. But one thing that I thought was really fascinating that I think you and I actually discussed the other day was when I was over there, I saw a tremendous amount of service dogs, PTSD service dogs, more than I'd ever seen in my life, actually. And if you look at the statistics over the past 2 years of suicides and attempted suicides among IDF members, they're sky high. And I would ask some soldiers over there, because here in the United States, this, post global war on terror veteran community became a real constituency. And I would ask them, do you see that happening over there in Israel? And they said no. But I think if you would have asked somebody in the United States here 1 or 2, 3 years after the GWAT started, you would have probably heard the same thing. But I think that's something that is yet to be reckoned with. And this happens with war. I think that is something moving forward that has the potential to be impactful.
You're listening to the Arab Digest podcast with me, William Law, and from Washington, D.C., the Cato Institute's Jon Hoffman. Yeah, and the IDF is stretched. I mean, they've got commitments in Lebanon. They've got the West Bank. They've got as you say, policing the kill zone, a very bleak phrase to describe what they're doing in Gaza right now. And of course, Iran is still there, and Israel still feels threatened by Iran. I mean, you mentioned the hegemon. The only hegemon I can see right now is Israel, and behaving in a very belligerent and aggressive way. But, and also you talked about the ceasefire. Well, the ceasefires in Lebanon and Gaza have been violated on a daily basis by Israel. They don't pay any attention, I think, to ceasefire. So what do you think Netanyahu's end game is, or do you think he even has an end game? Is it just about his political survival? Is there anything beyond that?
Yeah, no, and like you said, the violations of the ceasefire are ongoing. I think in the Lebanon statistic is most stark. In the year since the ceasefire with Hezbollah was sealed in November 2024, Israel has struck Lebanon more than 1,000 times, according to the Wall Street Journal. That is not a ceasefire, but it's staggering. Does Netanyahu actually have an end game? I'd say he does, and it is perpetual war, courtesy of the American taxpayer. He doesn't have any intention of leaving Gaza. He has no intention of curtailing the rampant settler violence in the West Bank, which is getting worse by the day. And we were there, we saw it. And he has no interest in de-escalating regional tensions. In fact, probably some of the most interesting meetings that I had when I was over there was with Israeli security folks, who tend to be a little more sober and clear-eyed about the situation than politicians in Israel. And it was interesting speaking with them, because on the matter of Lebanon and Iran in particular, because nobody really knows the extent to which the ceasefire in Gaza will last. There's real shock inside Israel over the extent to which Trump has taken control over the situation. And what was hammered home to me numerous times was the biggest debate right now inside Israel and we heard this from multiple people across the political spectrum, was the biggest debate happening is, are we a vassal state of the United States? Which I found just purely hilarious. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it was hard to keep a straight face with that one. But Trump seems to be very involved in the ceasefire in Gaza. Obviously, his 20-point plan or whatever is not a real solution. We're looking now at de facto partition of Gaza across the yellow line, the Israeli-controlled yellow zone, which represents 60% of the Strip. And you've yet to see real movement on what you could consider phase two of the ceasefire, which is this international stabilization force, Hamas disarmament, Gaza de-radicalization, whatever that means, and Israel actually leaving the Strip. And then, of course, you have Trump and Tony Blair, who are supposed to turn it into some sort of Six Flags resort or something. Um, but when you speak to security folks, particularly on Lebanon and Iran, it's very much an accepted conclusion that further escalation is a matter of when, not if.
Yeah. Well, that's a concerning thought, John. Now, look, you've mentioned the West Bank, and you spent time in the West Bank, and just give me a little bit more about what you saw, and did it shock you? Because certainly the footage I've seen, I've been in the West Bank many times, but the extremism now, the violence of these vigilante settlers is really quite striking.
Yeah, it was going around the West Bank. I consider myself a pretty through and through libertarian who believes in individual liberties, property rights, and you can't square that circle when you go in and look around the West Bank. It goes against my moral code. And it was striking. We went to several places that had been several Palestinian villages that had recently been burned down, completely destroyed by Israeli settlers. We came across numerous olive fields where all the trees had been cut down and burned, and just the barriers to movement in everyday life were extraordinary. And when we went to some of these destroyed villages, there was one in particular that was near a particularly aggressive Israeli settlement, and the guide that we were with, who was a former IDF soldier actually, and he told us, he said, we're going to drive down here, we're going to look at this village. He said, but he was like, I cannot stress to you how quick we have to be, because if they see us, there was only one road leading down to the village. It was kind of down a hill, and he said very clearly, he said, if they see us, they'll block us in and they'll kill us all. It's that level of impunity, and that's terrifying. And we went to Hebron, and that is kind of, that's ground zero for the occupation. The roads in which Palestinians aren't allowed to walk or drive on, despite this being a city of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. And it's like any city where the houses and businesses are right along the street, but the streets, the Palestinians are not allowed to walk or drive on. So the IDF has welded their front doors closed, so they can't exit their homes. So they instead have to go out the back, out through the roofs or something like that, which is just, and seeing that was really striking.
Yeah, yeah, that is a striking image of the imprisonment of Palestinians captured right there, John. This road that Israel is on, claiming to secure peace through unending war, again, a phrase you use, that where does that take Israel in the medium to the long term? I mean, I look at it and think that's a dead end road.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this road that they're on, I would say, is a product of the U.S. Israel relationship, because our subsidy, the American subsidy for Israeli policy, insulates them from the costs of such policies. It allows them to pursue policies that are unsustainable. And, it makes it so Israel doesn't have to make trade-offs, which every state on planet Earth has to do, because why would they make any trade-offs when the most powerful country in the history of humankind backs them unconditionally? And this path that Israel is on, and we heard this from a lot of folks over there who are more critical of this path. One, just the unsustainability of the path, and how the dependency on the United States is only going to grow as they go further down this path of pursuing these. I refer to them as their maximalist ambitions in the occupied territories in the broader region. But something that I always try to, push towards those in the United States and those in Washington who are emphatically supportive of Israel. I would argue this is not in Israel's long-term interests. Obviously, I'm concerned with U.S. interests, but there's a lot of folks who care about Israeli interests, and I would say this is not helping them. You do not get regional integration by bombing all of your neighbors. You will not ever reach a peaceful settlement with the Palestinians through force. And talking about the West Bank and talking about this conflict more generally, I'm a political science nerd. So in the back of my mind, when I went on this trip and when I analyze U.S. policy towards Israel, there's a large demographic component here, because by 2050, the population in Gaza, this was projections before the war, obviously, but the population in Gaza was supposed to hit 5 million. The population in the West Bank was supposed to hit 5 million. And the Palestinian population within Israel proper is supposed to reach a little bit over 3 million. So what does that mean? That means that the total Palestinian population across Gaza, inside Israel, and the West Bank is supposed to be higher than the Jewish Israeli population by 2050. So this is unsustainable.
Yeah, and of course, many Israelis are taking the decision to leave Israel.
Yes, and that's something also that folks over there had impressed on me. Those who are critical of what Israel is doing, there is this brain drain, if you want to call it that, happening, whereby those who have the means to leave are leaving. One guy summed it up to me pretty well. He just said, he was like, my kids have no future here. And obviously this is not the majority of Israelis that feel this way, but it is a not insignificant number of those who are leaving, and those who leave obviously have the means to do so, so they're from the more affluent parts of society and so on.
The question that's been hovering and really threaded into our whole conversation, John, and I'll ask it now. What hope is there that Trump and those around him will see the dance that Netanyahu is weaving around the president? They'll see that and do what needs doing, not only to halt the genocide and the ethnic cleansing, but to do what is, as you have argued, John, in America's own best interests. You need to slow or halt entirely the flow of weapons. What chance that President Trump would take that step?
Unfortunately, I think that chance is pretty low. At the end of the day, Trump is a pro-Israel president. He obviously, was very instrumental in getting the first ceasefire this year in January and then getting this most recent ceasefire. But as to whether Trump will be the individual that restructures the U.S.-Israel relationship, I just don't see that happening. And I don't see that being hinted to in my conversations with folks working with and around Trump. And this is the problem. This is going back to our discussion about the shift on the political right, because it's largely generational. Those who now hold a more critical view of the U.S.-Israel relationship, there isn't that political and economic capital yet to back up that perspective. So, and the United States now is going into an election year, the midterms, and these are going to be very crucial given the elections this year, where Mamdani won, and, even here in Virginia, Spanberger won. So, the United States is going into a critical midterm. So, all of its attention is going to be focused on that. We are rapidly approaching war with Venezuela, which will immediately consume just about everything Trump uh, is doing. And there's still horrible economic conditions here in the United States, dramatic polarization. There's so many issues facing the United States right now that the ability of this issue to just seep through the cracks, or for Netanyahu to outmaneuver Trump on Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, or so on, the chances are incredibly high. So, unfortunately, for the time being, and also I should say, Israel is now in an election year. By law, they have to have elections by October of 26. And Netanyahu very much does not want to lose his grasp on power, and he roots his quote-unquote legitimacy in his hawkishness. So, again, there's kind of this perfect formula of horrible outcomes that we're currently faced with, but I think long term is where we will see real change.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's. But this macabre dance with Trump and Netanyahu continues, and the Palestinian people pay this horrible, horrible price, and the region as well. I mean, the insecurity in the region with the behavior of Israel continues. We will, I know, John, come back to this again. But I thank you for your time today.
Of course, Bill. It's always a pleasure.
My guest today on the Arab Digest podcast was the Cato Institute's Jon Hoffman, speaking with me from Washington, D.C. Arab Digest is an independent voice on the Middle East, North Africa. No sponsors, no advertising. Head to the website arabdigest.org and look out for the offer of a free 2-month trial to our reader-supported daily newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn, and search our library of more than 300 podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or other platforms. We thank you for listening. I'm William Law, editor of the Arab Digest. Essential reading, essential listening from independent sources.